European Tour 73 is a documentary short that has been playing film festivals all over the place and is scheduled to have some theatrical screenings when that becomes a thing again, which is very exciting. Joining Cassandra and I now is the writer-director of European Tour 73. Please welcome to the show, Ross Munro. Thank you for being here.
Oh, awesome. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Let's dive right into the documentary because this is a personal journey for you that we all get to watch along. Tell us about European Tour 73.
Well, yeah, it's a documentary, as you mentioned, about a very personal story about my mom and dad back in 1973, which is a galaxy far, far away, I know. They basically, especially my dad, had this passion and this almost obsession about taking, at the time, myself and my four other brothers, who were all children, to Europe for 6 weeks, just barnstorming around country after country, and all packed into this VW camper that we would eat, sleep, and drive around in. And oddly enough, my dad, who was not an artistic person whatsoever, he actually bought a Super 8 camera to actually document that. And so, hence, all these years later, I've been carrying around all this Super 8 footage, and being a filmmaker, along with my wife, Maria, who's a producer, we thought, let's take a look at this and see if we can find a film in here. And I started going through all this footage, all these reels of Super 8 footage, and I realized, you know what, maybe, we actually have a film here on different levels. The one level being it's kind of a nostalgia piece about maybe people would be interested in, things that how the world was almost 50 years ago, like from a lot of cultural or political standpoints, and also just that whole idea that from a Canadiana sense, and the idea that, back in the early 70s, it was kind of common that there was a lot of large families. Like I had a lot of friends and families, friends who would have, they would have 5 kids in their family, et cetera. And so I think like now that's also a changing thing that seems almost nostalgic. The idea that, like a set of parents would actually have 5 or 6 kids, as sort of a normal thing. And then to pack that up, those little kids up and go to Europe would be crazy.
No, yeah, that's the thing that struck me right away, is that 5, too many. Also, yeah, to take those 5 kids on a 6-week trip through Europe is challenging on 1,000 different levels. Just wrangling 5 kids is a lot. And then on top of that, I mean, financially speaking, that's also a difficult commitment. But you guys budgeted about $5 a day?
Yeah, you know what? That's another thing, like you say about that time in 1970. There was a very popular set of travel books that came out around that time, like Frommer's How to Go to Europe on $5 a Day, which was kind of like the Bible to my parents. They had that book, and it was like, I know it seems hard to believe on $5 a day. I don't know what that would be in today's money, but it seems incredible that you could sort of navigate around with 5 small children and, of course, 2 adults, and that would supply food and, all the travel costs and everything. But it was that my parents actually made that work. We would pull into a town somewhere in Europe, whether it was Holland or England, and we would usually just park our van in a farmer's field, so we didn't pay nothing as far as, accommodations. That was the original Airbnb, which was just pulling into someone's driveway without them knowing about it. And and then my mom and dad we'd stock up on things. We'd get, big jugs of milk and big loaves of Wonder Bread and peanut butter and jelly, and we would eat that for 2 or 3 days, and we'd go to a campground or something where we could jump in a shower once in a while. But other than that, I can remember when the trip was over, near the end of the trip, the biggest thing is I was excited about as a 9-year-old was just being able to be in a shower. It was like this miracle.
Wow. Yeah, that's a trip that not too many people are taking today. I also just gave it a quick Goog, and so $5 in 1973 would equate to just about $30 a day today, which is still nothing. And good on your parents. Like, it seems like they must have had a bit of an adventurous streak in them to take this on, and especially there was no phones back then. There was no handheld devices to occupy 5 boys. You guys must have been just bouncing all over that van half the time.
Yeah, it seems hard to believe. Like, when I look at some of the footage and everything, and I see the van we had, and I keep thinking to myself, like, how did 7 human beings actually sleep there and exist in there? And you're right about that's the thing that we also talk about in the movie. We kind of create a montage that's kind of humorous, but at the same time, it reflects on what you say is the reality of the time, which is like, my mom and dad, they had to plan everything. Like, they had to, rent this camper thing in advance, like which we picked up in London. As soon as we got to London, we traveled from Winnipeg on a flight from Winnipeg, which was the first time I'd ever been on a plane back in 1973 when I was 9. And we flew nonstop Winnipeg to London, and we got to London. And then, like, almost immediately we had to go get the van, and then because that was the thing we drove around in, and that was our transportation. But it's amazing that they organized, flights, passports, like for 5 little kids. My mom had to get clothes for, proper clothes for all 5 kids, and just the amount of planning. And the thing is, my dad, he wasn't really overly adventurous person, but I could see, and that's part of the looking back on the trip with the film, is that it's revealed itself all these years later as to, like, the whole passion that my dad had, that he had this dream of bringing his whole family to Europe, because his dream when as he grew up, his passion was like his father served in World War II in Europe, and growing up, I think that was a seminal moment in his life to be a child growing up in a small Manitoba town, getting, following the mystery and the terror of his own father fighting in Europe in World War II for the Canadian military. And I think he always had this idea that one day he was going to have kids and a family and all that, and then somehow he was going to bring them, and with his own passion of retracing his own father's steps in the military throughout Europe. And I think that, that passion was so strong that, it was a unique thing that he never really did after that or before that.
That's really beautiful, and it's really amazing that sort of all these years later, you have all this footage, and not only are you able to make it into a film, but it's a film that other people want to watch. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the times when my dad is currently going through this footage from when I was a kid, and it's not something that anyone who doesn't know my family is going to want to watch. But you've managed to take this and make a narrative and send it to film festivals and have it be something that people are enjoying. What has been your favorite part of having people see this film?
Well, I think, once people, like what you alluded to, once people get over the sort of idea that, like, oh my God, people they actually had like that many kids a long time ago, and they actually would do something like that. It seems adventurous and a little crazy. But then I think people are drawn to the film. I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that everybody can relate to our movie European Tour 73, because they've got in their family lore and legacy and history, every family has some kind of trip, like a very seminal trip or adventure that they did, something that was a very defining sort of trip that, within their own family. So I think I've had people come up to me. I mean, we've shown our film, as you mentioned, at film festivals, but the film festivals have all, had to go online. So sometimes we don't get that immediate reaction that we would get when we presented films in person. But we have had a lot of people share their experiences with us, even in that way of showing our film. And that's the thing that connects them is they say, oh, I remember when my mom and dad, they took us on this crazy trip when we were kids to whether it was Disneyland or they went to Mexico or just some kind of trip they did, camping or whatever, that they still talk about, and that seems to be a real pivotal moment within their family. So I think that's what people really react to, because they find that commonality. And then there's also in our movie, we also broached the idea of my dad's father, my grandfather, being in the military. And I think a lot of families also have that multi-generational family members that served in militaries in the past or present. And there's also that relatability of that as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even just this conversation is reminding me, when my brother and I were teenagers, my parents took us to England and Scotland, and that was only with 2 kids and more than $5 a day. And it was still touch and go at times. There was almost murders. And so but nothing but fond memories, right? And yeah, everyone can relate to sort of that something in their childhood that becomes a really life-affecting moment, and relate through that way, even if it wasn't, this scale of a trip or this type of moment. And I think also right now, like, it's been a tough year for people reflecting on happy times from their youth, and stuff like that is probably a real bonus side benefit of watching the film.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is the timing of that. Like, we've been working for this film, we've been putting it together. Even though it's a short film, we've spent 3 years or so really putting this film together. And we obviously had no way of knowing that, that extra sort of unintended resonance of, like, having this quarantine and everybody now maybe being a more self-reflective in terms of, what's gone on with their past or with their family or with the present. And with the lack of, being able to sort of being mobile, it's sort of like our film is sort of like, it's kind of like created a pleasant niche for people that have seen our film, because, like I said, it kind of like reminds them and, how great it was. And maybe in some ways we kind of took for granted that you could always travel and you'd always have that independence to move around the world. And I think it kind of like reminds people of a time when we could do that. And it also reminds us, like, in terms of the present, in terms of realizing how important it is to get back to that again. And even in our movie, European Tour 73, one thing we kind of comically and bittersweet look at is that I was a huge movie fan when I was 9 years old, and I actually didn't want to go on this. I was dreading this trip because for the whole summer I was not going to be able to see all the best summer movies of 1973. So I didn't like that. And then another thing is the movie is also nostalgic towards the movie-going experience, which is another thing with the current COVID thing, that people have suddenly now not been able to have that communal, almost church-like gatherings of going to movie theaters.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of going to movie theaters, I mean, how can people see European Tour 73?
Well, yes, thank you so much for asking me that. We've actually spent the last year showing it, in film festivals, which, of course, have moved towards the online thing. And now we've got maybe a couple more festivals yet, but we can't announce them yet because our intention for sure, because now that the festival's tour is kind of running out, we've got, like, in Toronto, for instance, Vancouver, Winnipeg, at least around Canada, we've got, like, a lot of major cities now that have actually agreed to show our film theatrically. And my wife, Maria, and I, who produced the film, we want to go and present the film ourselves. So the problem is right now, like, we're, of course, like everybody else, we're kind of awaiting this, hoping on sort of like this changeover of with the pandemic that things improve so that we can actually facilitate showing our films again back in the theater experience, and then we can actually present them in person and really get that feedback. And so I guess hopefully people can be patient. I guess that's the key word nowadays, is being patient. And believe me, I'm trying to maintain my patience, because I'm just dying to get out this period, to get back in the world, but also to bring our film out and actually to put that, to really get that tactile reaction of an audience and be able to actually talk to them after and really have that communal experience with them. So I guess, to make a long story short, we really are, just as soon as things sort of get safe and the theater experience becomes a reality, we're going to be just launching European Tour 73 will be a theatrical North American Tour 22, hopefully.
That's amazing. And so for now, I guess if people follow you on Twitter at Ross Brew, I imagine that as soon as that happens and the world gets back to a little bit more normal, you will be tweeting about that.
Oh, yeah. We're really active on social media. Yeah, and I have my YouTube channel, which is Ross Munro Films. You can subscribe to that, and we put all our content on there. So, yeah, at Ross Brew for sure. And then you'll see that, I'm also on Instagram and everything. So, yeah, you know what? That has been a lifeline to really connect and maintain a relationship with our viewers and potential independent film fans. So thank you for mentioning that, because that really has been a great lifeline for us to maintain contact.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such an easy way for people to be made aware when those screenings start happening, and they can check it out. And the film, again, is European Tour 73. The filmmaker, Ross Munro. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your support. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Anytime.